Is the mic on? All right. Thank you. Everyone's here, so we'll kick off. It's super exciting to be back. Post-pandemic event. Finally, we can meet face to face. I think it's my third or fourth time at KIEF, and I can tell you how much I'm looking forward to this panel. I'll introduce all the speakers as we get to the questions, but for now, I just wanted to acknowledge your presence. So you chose this session over a session that talks about immortality. You could be listening to what it takes to live to 100 years old, but you're here, so thank you. Another reason you might be here is some of you might have watched Black Mirror. Raise your hand if you've seen any of those episodes. All right. Not everybody's seen it, but it's basically a show that takes anything that already exists, any technology that we're already using right now, and then pushes it to the extreme where everything just, runs off the rails. We get to dystopia when we take any tech trend and make it extreme. So what I wanted to do is actually involve you in one of those Black Mirror episodes. Are you all ready to experience the end of life, end of humanity in the digital world? So let's do this. Let's all get up, please, yes. Take out your device. Everybody got one, right? Okay, you have your devices? Now unlock it, please. Okay, unlock it. Yeah, you can check your messages. And now the next thing you have to do is hand it to a person on your right. And on the right, there's nobody next to me. But no, don't worry about it. I'm not going to make you do it. But how did it feel? Yeah, comfortable sharing your digital life with somebody? Just opening it up like this? So that's the idea. This is how important this conversation is. That's what it feels like. So there is a sense of unease with respect to technology. I can tell you all the headlines, 90% of all the data has been created in the last 2 years. I don't know if it's true or not, but this headline in 2013, kind of threw everybody off. And there's data is a new oil. We've heard that as well. There's exponential technologies that basically turn the world upside down every 10 years instead of every 1,000 years. All of this is happening, but nothing really captures the excitement and anxiety. It's not one or the other. It's always both. And that's what this conversation will be about. Is it a dystopia we're reaching with endless technological progress, or is it a utopia? Is it going to all be great, or is it all going to be terrible? But we know it's probably going to be something in the middle, and that's what we'll explore. We won't look into 100 years forward. Let's look just 10 years forward. So to make sure, again, to understand where you all stand, we'll start with a poll. We'll do a Slido poll. You're familiar with this Slido thing? So scan the QR code. It should work. And then fellow panelists, if you don't mind, you can also be involved and vote. So the idea with this poll is to reflect on your own personal experience. Don't think generally. Think of yourself. If you are getting a loan or insurance, will your loan officer ask for your social score in 2030? Is your fridge going to order its own food? Not some hypothetical fridge, but your own, right? So will you be sitting in a video call that's actually a hologram, where you see people physically present, but they're not really there? Will this happen to you personally? Again, not in theory. All right, so we have... everybody expects the digital currency to work. So we'll be using Bitcoin to buy pizza. Something else, right? The fully autonomous cars, you'll see them on our roads, not on Silicon Valley, but here in Kiev in 2030. And I would encourage the speakers also to consider those responses as you as we get to your remarks. Maybe one more thing from me, since this is a digital conversation. Feel free to involve yourself digitally. Take photos, tweet them, share them on social media, tag this event. Also, hello to everybody watching online. And if you want to ask questions, you can use the Telegram bot to submit your questions to the panelists. But without further ado, we'll kick off. I think I'll just go. No, I think I'm going to pick and choose from the panelists and introduce everybody briefly as I ask a question. So I'll go first to Olga Ustinova, who represents Vodafone in Ukraine, and I presume there are Vodafone users in this room. So the question I'll ask everybody is more or less the same. You know, what technology is on your mind? What do you think will shape the next 10 years? What most meaningful? What are you thinking about? What's good and bad about it? So give us your thoughts.
Всем добрый вечер уже, наверное.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will continue this challenge with phone. I will not ask you to stand up and you basically to take it to your neighbor, but I would like to ask you to take a look at that and take a look at how many icons and mobile apps you have on your device. Because right now, according to statistics, it's about 11 apps. I think that people here in this room, they have at least twice more. But basically, right now we have those forecasts that one person will use at least 4 hours for the mobile connection, 88% of which is going to be spent for mobile apps. The trends have accelerated in the couple of recent years, especially due to COVID-19. The apps are now being used 30% more than before. And now if we talk about the future, then in order for us to continuing broadening our opportunities and technologies, we need to work harder. Our phone is now our wallet. You can pay any service with that. Just recall how hard was it to pay the municipal utilities when you were standing in a line in a post office. Right now, you can buy any product, any product that you can with your phone. You can sell currency, create conferences, do whatever you want with a mobile phone. You can do that with a mobile phone, and in order for it to work, you need connection. You need mobile connection to do that. So right now, I do believe that the main trend that will set out the new revenue stream that will be the foundation for the creation of the new sectors and new apps, that will be the 5G connection. Why? Because it globally is different to something that we currently have. We now have around like 82-83% of our coverage works on the LTE. The speed under the LTE connection is quite significant, but 5G has shown us that it will be 100 times higher than the LTE that we have. And there will be just 1 millisecond of delay. You know, even a person's eye is blinking faster than the delay of the signal in the network that is passed through millions of kilometers. What does it mean for us? It means that we have a real opportunities to build up the virtual reality and virtual traveling, for example. We have the real opportunity to have the autonomous cars, the cars that are driverless. It means that we have this opportunity to automate all of the enterprises, and based on all of that, in the next 10 years, first of all, we have to develop the infrastructure. We need to have the 5G networks. We need to have these opportunities available. And then when there is going to be a foundation, and we'll have a surplus of all of the other products. Thank you. Thank you. And by the way, if we will get back to the poll results, can I just take a look at them at one again on the screen? That's quite interesting to say. That's basically not autonomous cars. Now, the virtual reality is not going to be quite possible without the 5G. And the idea itself, as digitalization is the...
can connect to it in real time. Great, thank you for this pitch. But another, while we have this on the top, it talks about digital ID, right? Passport, international travel is just one instance, but the idea that you are all comfortable with is your device or just a digital identity is going to be quite a common occurrence. And I wanted to go to Rob because that's his topic. He looks at digital identity. He's founder and CEO of Sideci. It's Ireland. Am I pronouncing it right? Yeah. So it's an Ireland-based tech business. And Rob and I met in Davos, where he and his company were selected as a tech pioneer, which is quite a privilege. Not every tech company deserves that title. But Rob, in your world, what's your sense of this idea of digital identity and how you look at that?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you to the forum for the invitation. Digital identity is a massive topic, and it's one of those topics that you could start talking about technology, law, privacy, a whole range of different things. And when I look at the poll that came up, a paper passport won't be required for international travel. The biggest issue there is not technology, it's law. And for laws to change, it requires governments to move, and governments don't move quickly. So I am not going to say that I think we'll see digital passports as a normal occurrence by 2013, maybe 2050, maybe 2040 at a stretch. In some countries, for certain, we will see it, where you'll be able to move maybe between Ukraine and maybe the United States or Canada or wherever. But across the world, I will say I don't think that's going to happen. But in a general sense, digital identity, I think, is going to be pervasive. And what it will do will help in the enablement of services. Digital ID is plumbing. It's a means to get water from one point to another. It's a means to facilitate, a car. Who's driving that car? How do you bind that car to the driver, to the wallet that sits in that car when I drive up to, Domino's Pizza and want to get my pizza? They don't really care who I am. They just want to know that the transaction that I'm performing will be executed reliably every single time. And that comes from reliably knowing who you are. And delivering all of those different things. So we think about identity at a very high level in terms of the enablement of services and the provision of the data to the providers of those services to ensure certainty around transactions. And when you start to boil it down, there are going to be some really key players in all of this. Authoritative sources, meaning sources of truth, who ultimately says you are you. Is it you, or is it your government, or is it Vodafone, or is it MasterCard? Who? Do you trust them? Do others trust them? Can I trust how the data is communicated? All of these are going to be really, really challenging questions. So it boils down to certainty, and I think all of the participants on this stage are going to have a role in playing an important part of it in the solution.
Thanks, Rob. I think we'll pick this up again because identity and privacy and who owns it, who controls it, and like you say, it's not an individual company. It's just what's the right systemic solution that everyone's comfortable with. And we'll also hear from Marjorie in a bit on the policy debate within Europe, especially in light of recent revelations related to big tech. But before that, I wanted to go to Natalia, who is representing MasterCard. And the reason I want to do that is because digital currency came up second. So most of you in this room are anticipating this technology to advance quite quickly. So can you talk about what's on your mind in terms of technological development that will shape the next 5-10 years?
Добрый вечер, добрый день.
Good evening, good evening. I was thinking like what kind of question I was be asked about the fridge or about the payments. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak about the digital currencies, because the digital currencies is about payments and transactions, and MasterCard is about payments and transactions, and the technology that we bring there are about payments. So answering about this challenging question that you posed to the previous speaker, basically, who will do that, who'll be responsible, who'll be trustworthy. We have to understand there are certain principles of the payment systems, and MasterCard is about security and the data protection. But if we speak about the cryptocurrencies and the opportunities to pay with cryptocurrencies, that is the sector that all of our partners are looking into. And let us divide the blockchain technology that is behind it, because it gives you the opportunity not only to pay with cryptocurrencies, but it gives you a lot of different cases that will help us in education or in healthcare infrastructure. And when we speak about what is currently going on in the world, where do we see MasterCard and cryptocurrencies developments? We are based on the very same principles. It has to be safe. It has to be compliant to the legislation. Thus, one of the international trends right now is about partnership with government and collaboration with governments. The approval, the permissions, regulations, it all has to be compliant to the national bank, to central bank regulations. If you know that, for example, Bahamas Central Bank has officially approved its currency as cryptocurrency, you can already provide some of the transactions with that. They announced that then based on the research that we have seen, 80% of the central banks all over the world are getting interested in cryptocurrency. 40% half a year ago, they have already been doing something in this direction. So if you will take a look at the open sources and the open data that you'll have, you will see 3 or 4 countries all the time. The central banks of these countries have already been thinking and doing something, and Ukraine is going to be among those countries. You might be heard that the National Bank has already approved them certain normatives that start developing us in this direction as well. MasterCard has already developed the cryptocurrency program. Of course, it includes all of those principles, the support of the currency. What is the problem with the cryptocurrency? They're not supported with anything. They're not provided with the central body support and central institution support. We will be collaborating with those partners who will provide those currencies and who will follow those principles. But we already have this program, and our main participants, they can already apply to those programs and to participate in them. And basically, yes, we consider that as well. Speaking on the bitcoins or the cryptocurrencies itself, I think that maybe there is just the momentum for that, because I think that when the central banks are going to turn to that, and it will happen. This is the trend for the next couple of years. It will happen. Thank you. Thank you.
When you say that the government-backed currency is acceptable and decentralized currency is less, I think maybe that's what Ilya wanted to respond to. But the counter-argument is, why is that? Is it because we're used to it? Is it fair? Should it be distributed? Because money at the end is just a feature to facilitate transactions, and it's an interesting debate. I'm not on one side or the other, but it's worth a discussion. Maybe I'll go to you, Ilya, next, since you wanted to follow up on the digital currency, I suppose.
Спасибо за слово. Я хотел немножко прокомментировать коллегу.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to comment what my colleagues have said, because basically I present the investment and the commercial blockchain as well. And in a couple of recent years, I've started to work with the regulators in Europe on the level of the European Union and at the level of Lithuania as well, that I'm coming from. So you've said that right away, that I strongly believe in cryptocurrency and in decentralization overall, and I do strongly believe in the blockchain technology. But then, de facto, what I disagree with is that the central banks, they are supporting that. Quite opposite. In those small countries like El Dorado or Bahamas, they're supporting these laws because basically for the financial system, they're very small countries for the financial systems. The real central banks that influence the overall financial climate, like US or European countries, they are killing off all of the cryptocurrencies initiatives. For example, all of the commercial banks, they don't want to work with either individuals who buy cryptocurrency through MasterCard. For example, in Lithuania, my bank blocks my transactions and I use MasterCard. I have a lot of respect to MasterCard, but my Swedish bank, for example, it blocks all of the transaction to all of the changes that are being directed to buying cryptocurrencies. If there are startups that we invest, if they're in their title or in their activities there is the word that says blockchain, the banks deny the services to them. The rhetoric is the same. We are for digital innovation, we support the future, but there are some specific recommendations from the central bank. Not a single regulated player has the right to use cryptocurrency. None of them has the right for the transactions. There is a specific decree from the Central Bank of Lithuania. And I do believe if we will get this question higher, then all of the economy of the contemporary countries is built on the philosophy of the very same central bank. When we had different currencies and different banks, so when the system started to dominate, there was the opportunity for the state to print out the money when it's needed for deficiency or for the war. It's not a secret that America is now exporting their dollars all over the planet. So it's hard for us to imagine that the main product of export, dollar, that they are going to rewrite that into the universal currency. I cannot imagine that. So I right now say that water and butter, the digital economy is based on the digital on the blockchain economy. It's not being mixed up with all the economy. I think in the next couple of years we'll have a segregation that will become stronger. But I do agree that in 20 or 30 years, then the regulator will just have to do that, because it's really hard to stop internet right now. The only hope for them is that despite their centralized policy of national banks, the cryptocurrency will win.
This to become a cryptocurrency discussion, but what happened, I think, what I wanted to kind of lift it up, this conversation, and maybe go to Marjorie, because she comes from a global think tank, and she looks at the digital society. She's executive director of Digital Society Initiative at Chatham House. But the reason I think it's perfect timing is because we're talking about the role of government versus innovation, right? Does the policy, does it stifle innovation? Does it promote it? And what's the right balance? I think it'll be wrong to say that the government should step back and let things just evolve as they do, or it should tighten the screws to a degree where there's no space for anything new to happen. So finding that balance is going to be a challenge. It always was. It's not unique to cryptocurrency debate. But Marjorie, what's your sense of this conversation? What's the most interesting kind of policy discussion within Europe or globally around digital?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So as you say, I work for a think tank based in London, and the core focus of my research is essentially the following question: is how do you create a policy framework that would lead to beneficial technology? So in that sense, I'm a technology optimist, because I believe there's such a thing as technology that benefits society as a whole. But what we may not have just right now is the right principle and the right policy to achieve that goal. And so I think if you look back 10 years ago, what essentially happened is a digital Wild West. You had a handful of big companies that were extracting data in a lawless manner, and I think that the data is the new oil is a good analogy. It's basically extractive industries, and they were, in this context, a bit like ruthless miners, gold miners. And we all collectively woken up to the horror of data extraction with the scandal of Cambridge Analytica and Brexit and other political issue, where we realized that technology is really intertwined with policy. And then with this techlash came actually a series of new regulations that were really meant to regulate the digital space. And this is, at least for the last 5 years, a really booming and dynamic space in policy, which is funny because really it's adjectives that are often not associated with policy, but what we see is more collaboration between technology and policymaker. However, it's not yet a mature space, and I think a good example here is the general data protection policy that was launched by the European Union. And it's a good example because we have the perspective of time, but it also is very representative of the issues and the shortcomings of the space. So while it was really innovative at the time, it is still a very limitative policy. It's restrictive in nature, so it looks at limiting the collection, storage, and usage of data. It doesn't look at how do you share data, how do you enable usage of data. it's also very static. It's a snapshot in time of how the digital space was then, but it's maybe no longer relevant. And we know that a lot of the regulations that are developed today are likely to be outdated by the moment they're implemented. And finally, and that's probably one of the biggest issues we see in that space, the GDPR is still very much rooted in a specific region, in a specific set of values and assumptions. And specifically now we see this tension where there's assumption about what's the right balance between privacy and national security and national interest. And during COVID, this issue really resurfaced, and it's an ongoing conversation also with the US that has slightly different perspective on that, which create really problems to essentially share data across borders. So that's I think, in a summary, the main issue we see in that space is how static it is, how basically value loaded it is, and essentially not enough reflecting of the evolving nature of technology. I can talk a little bit about our recommendation, but I'm going to pause there because I think it'd be good in the next questions.
Super. I think I actually know who I want to go to next. But before that, I've seen a couple of questions already come in. So if you have something you wanted to ask the panelists, go through this Telegram bot, and I'll take note of it when the time comes. But for now, I think we're zooming in on this, again, the balance, right? It's like regulation is always a catch-up game, and technology, we know it simultaneously creates problems and solves problems, and this is kind of an infinite loop, right? Every time something else is introduced, it addresses what has come before and corrects some issues from the past, but creates the new ones. But I think Marjorie touched on the question of privacy that's central to this GDPR, if you've heard, is just a landmark regulation that Europe has put on the table, and it's now being widely adopted. But as you're saying, it always is behind times, right? What felt like frontier of regulation is already outdated, and how do you keep up? And I wanted to go to Rob and describe the world in which the technology you're working on, the privacy-enhancing technology, say it's adopted widely, what the world would look like if it did exist, and how would it change how we interact?
So just before I answer the question, I started working on the project I'm working on now back in 2012, so nearly 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, when I started pitching my idea to venture capitalists and others, I was almost laughed out of the room. People's view on privacy back then was, privacy is dead. Nobody cares. They're going to continue to give their information away forever because they want the services that are being provided to them. And what we've seen over the last 10 years, in particular when you look at GDPR and the evolution of legal systems, GDPR was a massive shift in terms of governments realizing the importance of regulating this space and how much value resided in people's data. Today, there's an estimate of somewhere between $2 and $3 trillion of value that is extracted from everybody's data around the planet. So roughly $1 trillion in the US, $1 trillion in Europe, and $1 trillion in the rest of the world. GDPR was essentially an attempt to put a brake on that. And as Marjorie said, it was a crude brake. It does certain things, it does certain things really well. It puts a complete brake on it. But that is not what we want to do. We want to be able to still provide services to people that enhance their lives in a way that is beneficial to them, but not at the risk of damaging their privacy, damaging their confidentiality, and things that you never wanted to happen to them because of the data that they shared. And this is where the technology that we've been working comes in. It's about putting in place technological capability that allows you to share things when you want to, expose that information, but like a light switch, enable you to switch it off when you want to. So for example, when you buy a pair of shoes from Amazon or wherever, instead of having to give all your data to Amazon, your name, your address, your credit card, all of that information, What if you could give it to them just for the moment they needed it and then switch it off so that they never get to see it again unless you decide you want to see them get it? This changes the dynamic so that Vodafone no longer has all of the information about where you are 24 hours a day or every shop that you purchase something with your credit card. It's only when you decide. And this redresses the imbalance, I think, in terms of how technology and data is being used. I mean, if we all knew what happens to our data, it would terrify us. The mobile phone is only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, if I was to give Andrew my mobile phone, I actually wouldn't be too worried. But if he saw all of the places that I had been in the last 10 years, and some of them I mightn't want him to know about, and my wife definitely doesn't want to know about all of them either, that would be terrifying. So this is the power of data. It can be used for good and bad, and technology, I think, is capable of restoring that balance to some extent.
Thank you, and I'll have our speakers respond. But before I wanted to sum up Rob's explanation as a saying you might have all heard. If the product is free, you are the product, and this is what we've come accustomed to, as we just heard. Is we want the convenience, like Facebook, super convenient. WhatsApp, you text your friends anywhere in the world. They're always accessible. You can call them. Do you pay for it? Anybody's paying for WhatsApp? No? But it's out there. So how does it exist? Like exactly how are they making money? They're monetizing data, and this is it's not. We can't be super critical of it because that's the model we accepted. It's not done, in spite of our interest. It's just somehow it's how the ecosystem is evolving, and the question is, can it continue, or will the consumers demand this power back, and will Rob's technology then go into marketplace and change it? But maybe I'll go to Olga and to you first, and just maybe say a few words if you feel. What Rob is describing, does it threaten your business? Does it enhance your business? Do you feel that that will be fair to the telecom sector, especially because a lot of value has been shifted to Google's, Facebook's of the world? They monetize the data. You have a ton of it. But what Rob is describing, when I take possession of my digital identity, what does that mean for you?
Очень хотелось ответить сразу, прям спасибо за слово.
Thank you very much. I really wanted to answer that as well, because basically everything is very easy. Whatever you do with your mobile phone leaves its digital trail, whether you want it, whether you don't want it. There's something that happens, and you have to take that as a fact, as the given. The question is who owns this data and why. Speaking about the Vodafone and the telecom operators, we're really overregulated. GDPR for us is something important because Vodafone is a global brand, and we have the number of workshops already, and basically that gives our opportunity for our subscribers to sleep good because they know their personal data is protected. But let us take a different angle for this situation. Right now, the 90% of the market is not identified. All of the Ukrainians know that it's a unique situation. The prepay, we don't know who you are, or at least you believe that we do not know who you are, what you are. The information is really, there's a lot of information, that's for sure, and it's a sensitive topic when we're raising this question, that the database has to be identified database, because we do not want, we're not afraid to, we're afraid to give the data to the operator, but we're not afraid to provide our telephone number to our financial means. And in this case, to provide this opportunity for different fraudulent topics to use our data, but it's not maybe the main topic for this discussion now. But when they're raising this topic, they also say, Olga, but what do you mean? You want to follow everyone. We're a free nation, free people. That's not the right thing to do. We want to have this private life. Go to the Facebook and Instagram. You're showing so much things in your Instagram and in your social media. Then it's a dilemma. You don't need to collect data about you. You show it all. On one hand, we want to be very private, very closed down. But in the other hand, we are giving all of the information away in the social media, and we don't care about that. So whether you will know that the Vodafone will know where you go and taking your car to, what is the speed that you're driving with, we can all decide like who's the owner of the car, who owns the car, who doesn't own the car, who has been to which countries in the recent times. We know a lot about you, but trust me, this data is in a very good hands because we understand the responsibility. We understand that the responsibility that we take as the operators, and we know that our users are the most important value for us. And the personal data is the most important equity for the telephone operator right now. If before, and still, sometimes the telecom we are evaluating by the number of subscribers, the revenues, but you will be surprised in 10 years there will be a completely different criteria to evaluate the operators. What is the data that they have? What is the information and data that they collect by the telecom operators and from the telecom operator? Because we are interconnected with a lot of services, with a fintech, with all of the supply, all of the procurement, just as I've said it from the very beginning, whatever you do with your phone, we know about that. So that's all with that. We do not know the details, of course, like what is it that you do there. But overall, there is a lot of models and there is a lot of production models that will help us to identify what you have done. But I would like to also support my colleague who wanted, and I wanted to mention that as well, because, technology has two faces, like two faces of the coin. Like the atom as well, it can create and it can destroy. Just to give you a very brief example, the face identification. When you use your phone, I'm sure that a lot of people have used the face identification of the phone, that not to click your passport on the phone, because all of life is digital right now. Digital signature, you're changing passport, you can't remember that. And you identify, you're unlocking your phone with Face ID. Most of your applications, you might use Face ID for that. I think that you have seen this news. The European Parliament has made a decision to prohibit the usage, the automatic face recognition in the public places. That gives us the understanding that the technology is non-toxic. The problem is that the way you're going to use that, this is the question. And in this case, the role of the state, the role of the regulator is important. It makes sure that all of the countries, they have their own way. China goes in one way, Europe goes in one way, because China already has the social rights already. There's something that we can see in the Black Mirror, and something that I didn't vote for. And this is maybe the scariest idea out of this topic. But the US, even though they're a very democratic world, but they're basically having everything. They're basically testing out all of the new technology with data usage. So all of the technologies that have been seen and created, even in the private business, they have been supported and have been sponsored by the military. Of course, we can think that maybe it would be used for the peaceful goals, but whether we like it or not, the technology will be developing further on. We can pretend that they do not exist. We can pretend that we do not need it, but they will find us in 10 or 15 years. Will we be ready for that as humanity? Will we provide the opportunity for the artificial intelligence to guide us? Will we give them the opportunity to manage us as robots? For example, you're going to be fully controlled. Your behavior will be fully controlled, but you will be saying that what it is that this is there's a question for all of us. What is the place that you would like to take? And this is the biggest challenge for humanity this year. Not about whether we need technologies or no.
The existential question, and that's what this panel was about from the start. Is technology pushing us towards dystopia, where it's 1984 all over again, right? The Big Brother is watching, and all of that. But I think, I don't know, maybe the panelists will respond, but the question is, what are we comfortable with? If digital companies, for-profit enterprises have possession of this data, and they're involved in this kind of societal level impact, right? That the Facebook is regularly accused of having an impact, not necessarily, doing it deliberately, but having an impact on elections, on outcomes of how modern democracy operates. But it's a company, it's a business. Are we comfortable with the business having that kind of power? If not business, are we comfortable with the state? It's I have I live in the Netherlands. I have a digital ID and issued by the government, and through that ID I can pull up my vaccination certificate. I'm comfortable with this, but I also have, say, Apple sign in that has my identity. I can use it to access other digital products, or Google. Like, what's good for me as a consumer, as a human? Like, what's the fair setup? Maybe I want it all to myself, like Rob's technology maybe will deliver, where I say I possess it, no one else has it. I know who I am, and I use it to access different services as I wish, not have Apple possess this information on my behalf. But I think this is very good where we are. Not necessarily very optimistic, but a good place to have a discussion. Now, Natalia, maybe you can respond. I don't know if this is a comfortable moment, but what's your
Да, платежи.
Yes, the payments are a very important part of our life, so I can comment upon that and answering to all of our speakers and all of my colleagues about what is going on. No matter how strange it is, or maybe that's not very strange, the client is in the center of everything, and all of the technologies on the payment that have been created, they all have been built on the idea of what client wants. And by the way, we now got to one of those trends that actually says that basically do nothing at checkout. The clients want to do less actions when they are completing the payment. Even especially understand that right now everything is turned out to the e-commerce, and the technology that we have seen in the couple of recent days, this is the technology that we're going farther away. So we will providing this help to our clients to make it as comfortable and as fast as possible. But it's about balance. There is a good opinion that any technology can be used both for good and for bad. We see that there is opportunities to be given this wellness, that there's idea for the client, but there will be security and safety on the other part of the line. And the security will be provided by the people behind. The payment person is in front, but there is the backing technology. There is the analysis of a huge amount of data that will give you maybe a secret or no, but any transaction by MasterCard is being supported on different levels of artificial analysis. And we have been analyzing this information on the risks analysis. And MasterCard is already supporting this data to each of transaction and providing it to the bank eminence for them to be able to provide new decisions for these payments. Developing this technology further on, we will already help all of the partners not only for the fraud protection, but we already help them to analyze their businesses. Those technologies are already available. That's what we have been doing and what we have been doing for quite a long time, not only for the banks, but also for the client service companies. The one that are facing the clients. We're not only speaking about the banking infrastructure and solely banking infrastructure. We're not speaking about this four-party model. We're already speaking about the multi-party models. We're engaging multiple participants, the fintechs, the service providers, whoever that is, innovators, entrepreneurs. They're already providing their thoughts and technologies into that. So speaking on technologies, we speak on the payments. We're going to be building partnership. We're going to build connections.
Perfect timing, based on those comments, to bring in a question from the room. Alexei Krichkov is asking, является ли проблема
whether this problem of privacy is a real problem in internet, or maybe that's paranoia. Maybe we should make everything maximum open and transparent, and then the cost of all of this data will be zero, and there will be no interest for fraud. So do you believe there actually is a privacy problem? Ilya? I'm just interested in one of this question. Can you please raise your hand? The people who actually read the agreement and the disclaimers at the sites when there are coming up pop-up at the sites. I see 5 hands.
Да, то есть, ну, моя, опять же,
You know, I'm not going to saying that my position is the only position, but you know, we had this. The GDPR was a shot in a leg. On one hand, it was supposed to protect the privacy and the client, because it will be very comfortable to issue the law and say, well, we issue the law. But take a look, only 5 people are reading those customer agreements. And I have made a research, 82% of people, they hate those pop-up windows with agreements. 86% click, yes, I agree. They do not read it, they just agree to that. And those 16% of people who actually read that, they have no understanding of what is being said there, because it's a legal language that has been specifically targeted to sell you the ticket to hell. Because basically I've talked to the lawyers and they said, you know, before the GDPR, they were just using the general notions of human values, ethics and morals. When the people have started to agree to you don't know what, the companies have started to include those points that you were scared of, or you know, just for fun, read what you're agreeing up to on Facebook, on Google, read the news, read those agreements, and you will be frightened, you will be surprised. You not only agree to the service, you give everything. You know, I sometimes do that. For example, every night on midnight, the Ryanair application has been provided my physical possession to a server. What do I mean by that? That basically, you know, on one hand, yes, those protection and safety, they're declared, but de facto, actually, it's not targeted to improve the privacy. That's just a command from my side. If you would like to regulate something and if you would like to do something, then we have to make it work, really. So not only to leave it as a declaration, not only to leave it as a flag, so that the states and or companies will only push to make it more inquisitive. Okay, but what about the idea? Let's forget what privacy is about. Just like forget about it, take it to the window and forget about it. Be transparent. You know, the idea that I really like from the one that had been voiced out here, and basically what I've heard here, what is the sense of collecting data that are not needed for a simple transaction? Why, when I'm buying shoes, they ask me about everything. For example, there is this flag for the application that will, I don't know, report when I'm coming to the certain place, and this is not needed for me to buy shoes. I would really like the model that if the company needs to complete the transaction with a person, they collect the minimum of needed data. You don't need my name sometimes. You know, I'm the big supporter of the blockchain systems. They are built on the idea. There is the trustless environment. So they don't ask you who you are, where you are. So I would be for the minimum collection of the needed data, and for them to be deleted as soon as the transaction is completed. There was another comment. I'm sorry. Just, you know, I have been slightly supporting your comment, so I'm really sorry for that. Because payments, quite recently, they're not about convenience. If we consider the financial system and state, the state is now making banks more to track, to follow, to block most of the payments, because the state has these functions of the law enforcement, and this started to include this law enforcement function to the financial actors. Before that, the law enforcement was checking it, but now the banks establishment starting to do that as well. So right now we used to say that it was done for the convenience of the clients. Right now I believe it's partly true and partly due to the need of the total control, because it's really easy to control people through financial feelings, through financial means. So I have mixed feelings about privacy. I do support that it's very serious issue, and you have to write it in the regulatory norms as well. I disagree that the European regulations, the GDPR, they will solve some issues. As for me, it only multiplies those problems that we have with digital environment.
I'm one of those people who clicks accept, move on, and do hate it, that it comes up every time. But I also am not comfortable that somebody collects all this data, but I don't have any tools to then say, I want this to stop, I want to be in control. But I wanted to go to Marjorie, and this question, the idea that since privacy is dead, like there's no space for it in the digital universe, why not just abandon it and accept it and move on?
Well, I don't think privacy is dead. We saw the result when you suggest you share the phone, and there's like a gasp for a second of people like, I'm not sure I want to do this. I see people nodding or not, but I think there's definitely a question about data literacy and the fact that it was a relatively new issue, no regulation, regulators comes in and, you know, maybe over-regulated to some extent, but there's definitely a need, and that's also one of the things we're pushing for, is a need for societal discussion. It's not only about what the tech companies do or the regulators decide to do, it's also as individuals, how literate are we about the digital space, what do we know the back end, the front end, etc. And I think that's the new frontier, is to engage the civil society in those talks. And in general, I will actually be very have some doubts about any of the stakeholders say, trust us with your data. We're fine with it. We'll take care of it. I think that I'll be much more comfortable to make sure that there's actually a discussion and multi-stakeholder perspective on that, because you have checked and balances, which, you know, is probably one of the other recommendations we have for this space.
I think Rob wanted to jump in.
Oh, I'm chomping at the bit trying to get in here. Privacy is one of those things. It's like fire insurance. You only need it once your house is burnt down. And, you know, when you've lost your privacy, then you realize what it means. I had this conversation with somebody in London whose Twitter account got hacked. And he was saying, no, I don't care. I'm going to give away my data forever. His Twitter account got hacked and somebody stole his identity. And suddenly he felt his personal space had been completely invaded. Someone was masquerading as him, and he felt what it meant to have lost his privacy. It is only when you lose it do you realize what it means. Now, in relation to cookies and having to click every single one of them, I agree. It is the greatest pain ever having to click all those cookies. But that is a representation of a very crude technological response to a problem. There are going to be much better ways of addressing the problem of saying, I don't want you to track me, I don't want my information shared with everybody. That ultimately will allow you to do it once, it'll be remembered, and everybody then can consume it. In relation to credit cards, for example, I mean, one of the examples that I give when I speak at events like this in relation to how you can secure your personal information is an example relating to a credit card. When your credit card has been compromised, your bank will tell you, take out a scissors and cut it up into pieces and put it in the bin. It is the safest place for it because it is now in lots of little pieces. When you break information up into little pieces and distribute it, it has very little value. So one of the technological things that we're working on at the moment is breaking information into pieces so that no single organization has all of the bits. They have to get it from all of the people or all of the organization who has one of the bits, and you control when they come together or not. So you can still use your credit card when you determine you want to use it, but no single organization has all of the pieces in order to use it without your direct permission. So this is a response, that's a technical response to some of the challenges that we're having in relation to the misuse of information. You know, and when I hear Marjorie say, you know, trust us with your information, the first reaction I have every single time is, do not trust them with your information, because it is almost the inverse of what they're trying to say to you. There is absolutely going to be something happening within those organizations to your information that you never intended.
I'll go to Olga first.
Just few comments. Смотрите, вы раскрываете о себе данные.
You're disclosing the data about yourself, and what will it reserve? You have disclosed the full data set, but it's about how you will use it. The data itself does not have value. You will not be able to resell it or buy it. The question is in what way you're going to use it. You have disclosed the data. Thus, if there are no people who are interested in those data, who use some filters, either the big companies or regulators, who has the access, any kind of person will have the access to that. So we presuppose that the criminals will have the access to this data as well. Will you feel safe, even in your own house, if you have just disclosed all the data? This is again the question that I'm getting back to. When we share with Facebook, with Instagram, we're telling everything about ourselves, and we believe that it's just transparency. That's it. We're forgetting the other side of the coin. This data can create a lot of challenges for your security, your personal security, the security of your family. The same thing you say, let's disclose the data. And what? What will it resolve? And I will comment again from this transaction and payment part. There is a great thought that when everything is good, when you do not lose money, we're ready to sign everything up. But when the fraud happens with your card, when the money are being taken out of you, you're starting to talk to your bank, and here the technology are included. An example from Ukraine. You might know what is the biggest fraud right now with the plastic cards, with the payment cards in Ukraine, is the social engineering and the other types of the social engineer. What do we mean by that? It means that you're receiving a call, 42 million of people, and you're disclosing your data gladly for the phone fraud. 2 years ago, we have seen this fraud. Since the moment that the person picked up, that's a very easy trick. We have a lot of people who will get your information disclosed. 2 years ago, that was 17 minutes since the moment you pick up until the person gets your money from the ATM that you have delivered your money in the other city. Last month, I have seen the same data. It decreased to 4 minutes. People are disclosing their data, passports, logins, entering the codes, give the codes and passwords to the people. They do it in the banking app. The client gives this information to the criminals. We will not find this solution in the framework of this panel, but this is something that we have to consider. People somehow are really happy to talk to the criminals and to disclose the data. That is why we're introducing all of these technologies together with our partners. And from the side of MasterCard, we already have the technology of passive biometry. What do we mean by that? It means that when you're making this payment, you are approving it in your bank, but technology already knows that it's not you. So basically, there are some things as the passive biometry, the behavioral biometry. So when you're loading your phone, how you're entering the data in your internet banking, so on and so forth.
Getting revealed that I did not expect. So I don't know how comfortable you feel. I think it's the same dilemma. Is like for the service to add value, for MasterCard to recognize a wrong pattern, it needs to monitor the existing pattern to know how I act with my money, to then say it's not you, it's somebody else. But for this to work, I need to trust MasterCard. They need to have access to all this information. But then we go back to this question of when do I agree to it, and will I ever be fully comfortable? I don't know. Maybe now that we're reaching the end of the session, I'll do a round of closing remarks for everybody on whatever we forgot to cover. What else you feel is important? If you wanted to maybe pitch an episode of a future Black Mirror, if you can say, look, this particular technology is most dangerous, or maybe dispute some of those dangers, and then we'll go just down the line, starting with you, Ilya.
Да, сегодня мы говорили о технологиях.
We have spoken about the technology. The very first question was, what are the technology that will definitely change our life? Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. I think that I would say that artificial intelligence will do something about that, because we have tried it, we had just touched it slightly. In the next 10 or 50 years, artificial intelligence will change our life significantly. All of the other things will change as well. I do believe there's a lot of things that have already been happening that we haven't seen. One of my colleagues in Stanford, responsible for artificial intelligence, he said, unfortunately, people for 5 years already don't understand how the artificial intelligence work, because they don't know how to work with this logics, with this construct. So let's hope it's for the best. Another point that's about the process, not the technology as well, the decentralization process. I do agree with this point that internet is dead, because on one hand, the internet is basically the regulators, the LTDs that are only working there. I'm sure that decentralization, the smallest share that already has existed, that blockchain, and that's all basically the third generation of internet, the decentralized internet, that's gives the good example that we can slightly improve of what is going on here. Decentralization and artificial intelligence, I would identify two.
The latest technology does things that no one understands. Like we, in some sense, we already lost control, and the intelligence explosion. You've heard of this phenomena? Anyone has heard intelligence explosion? It's the idea that if and when we get to a general intelligence, and no one can give you a precise date, but if we get to it, at the minute it happens, it's basically over. The machine will learn much faster than we can imagine, and it will improve itself, and then our intelligence will be left so far behind that we won't be able to catch up. So if and when we get to this point, we better be sure that what it's doing is something we ourselves are accepting, right? We do not lose control of technology that will overwrite humanity in terms of its capabilities. But I think what Ilya is saying is already making me a bit anxious. If today we're far away from general intelligence, but if the most brightest minds don't know what the machines are doing, they created their own language, right? There was this idea that AIs were talking among themselves in ways that no one knows. Maybe you wanted to add.
Да, это просто эксперимент такой был сделан, что...
Yes, there was an experiment when the engines of the artificial intelligence, Google and Facebook, they've got together, they've connected them for the first 5 minutes. They have switched to the invented language between the two of them, and they have started the communication to the language that is unclear for people. Maybe that just because was just more effective, and it happened a couple of times. It's not a chance.
AI, like this kind of AI we're describing, it doesn't do anything super complicated. It's just narrow focused, right? But if it's becoming more and more advanced, it's an interesting question. And then Marjorie talked about humane technologies. Maybe you will end on a positive note when it comes to you. But Rob, over to you. Closing remarks, something we missed.
I would agree. I think AI, unregulated, unrestricted AI is scary. AI works on the basis of data. If you feed bad data into the machine is going to learn bad things. It's as simple as that. So I think AI is the most exciting, but equally the most terrifying thing that potentially is out there. It needs to be controlled. And I leave with one parting thought. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. That applies to anybody who is working with data and has lots of data. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, if I were to add the word that I think captures it, we cannot sleepwalk into the end of human civilization. Like, if we get there, we should know what we're doing, or at least some try to control this process and not sleepwalk into it. But Natalia, over to you.
I think I will not try to repeat myself or my colleagues. My colleagues have said a lot, and I agree to what they've said already. But I think that I would also mention a different direction for us to think. Just if we speak about the Black Mirror, there is a Matrix reboot as well coming. This nice jokes that the new Neo, he would have chosen a different pill. And there's a continuation to this joke. The new Neo would never go to Morpheus because he has to take his baby to school in the morning, so he wouldn't follow him to the rabbit hole. So basically, I would say that it's something that is really relevant for me, and the strategy that what our company goes, that all has to be human-centric. We have to get a person into the center. And I would say that what is important is education. The educational system, we do not have to change it, but we have to adapt it to the modern challenges and to the modern technologies. I would be moving into this direction, developing education. Olga? I have been working in a big company for quite a long period of time already, and I think I will give you an example from here. When we have some challenges, when we have the new realities emerging and something is going on the global level, the first thing that you are believing, you're starting to think about is the vision. And we're now in this situation when the technological progress is so fast, everything has changed so dramatically. So I do believe that this is the high time for the humanity to start thinking about the vision of who we are, where we are, what are we going to be doing, what do we want to do. And then we are picturing all of the other things. We're currently discussing the technologies from the bottom. We're starting down there, but overall the technologies, they should help humanity to be happier, to be freer, to be whoever we want to be. And the question is, who is it that we want to be?
Philosophical dilemma. And since Marjorie, no pressure, but I hope you can end on an optimistic note. Technology is value neutral, right? It's almost like this train is moving forward. There's no point in stopping it. It will keep going. Like if you think of technology, my shoes is technology. Like I can walk a bit further than I would without them. The glasses are technology. It's all right. We've been adding this is what defines humanity in some sense. It's when we graduated from apes, it's because we've adopted tools. But the question, I feel like the unease that the Black Mirror presents is this technology now, are we subordinating ourselves to it, or are we still driving this train? So Marjorie, give us a sense of hope, please.
So I don't know if I'll be optimistic, but let's say I'll try to be a little aspirational at least. So I think I have 2 points to finish. The first one is collaboration. We still think and try to regulate technology as if it was a national matter or a local matter, but we know it's international, it's trans-border, and so I think it's really needed, like the UN is trying with the technology envoy and other, to actually talk about it at a broader level, because if singularity, as you mentioned, Andrew, happens, this is not a national question, this is a humanity question. Secondly, digital literacy. Technology is not magic. Sometimes it feels like magic, but it's not. It's a series of value, of assumption, of algorithm, of bad data, of good data. And I think it's important that we increase digital literacy. There is a responsibility also for citizens to understand what the app user using is, what is the data, how it works. And it's a bit like how you learn to read in the analog world. You need to understand what's the system and the logic behind your apps or the platform you use.
Thank you. I wanted to thank everybody who found the time for this session. I wanted to thank our speakers. I've learned a great deal, and I hope you as well. Thank you.